You are not real. Not the way you think you are. Not solid, not permanent, not the protagonist of some fixed story that started at birth and ends when your heart stops. You are a thought someone is having. Maybe that someone is you. Maybe that someone is something you invented so long ago you forgot you were pretending. Grant Morrison had a nervous breakdown in 1988. He was writing a comic book about insanity, about Arkham Asylum, that gothic fortress where Batman locks up all the minds that broke in interesting ways. Morrison was channeling madness, writing madness, and becoming madness. And then one day the character he created, a bald anarchist named King Mob, walked into his living room in Glasgow and sat down across from him. They had a conversation. Morrison couldn't remember who spoke first. That is when he understood. Fiction is not inert. Imagination is not passive. When you imagine something hard enough with enough detail, with enough belief, it does not stay on the page. It does not stay in your head. It gets up. It walks. It looks at you with your own eyes and asks what you thought you were doing. The Tibetan monks called these tulpas, thought forms, beings conjured from concentrated imagination, fed by attention until they achieve independence. Alexandra David-Néel, the French explorer who walked forbidden roads through Tibet in the 1920s, she made one. A jolly little monk, round and cheerful. She visualized him during months of meditation until one day he was just there, walking beside her, visible not just to her but to others in her traveling party. And then he changed. He grew thin. His face went sour. He started appearing when she did not summon him, showing up in her peripheral vision, watching her with something like hunger. It took her 6 months of focused ritual to destroy what she had created. 6 months to kill a thought. Philip K. Dick spent the last 8 years of his life trying to figure out if he was a science fiction writer or a Christian mystic named Thomas from the 1st century, beaming information into Dick's brain from outside time. He called it VALIS, Vast Active Living Intelligence System. Dick wrote book after book trying to decode what was happening to him, whether he was remembering or inventing, whether the distinction even mattered anymore. This is not a story about comic books or mystics or madmen. This is a story about you, about the architecture of self, about what happens when you realize identity is not discovered but constructed, not solid but scripted, not given but generated frame by an imagination you mistake for a camera when it has always been a projector. You are haunted by something you made. You have been performing a character so long the mask grew skin. And somewhere, in a room you cannot see, your future self is writing this moment, deciding what you do next, wondering if you will notice. 835. Grant Morrison does not write comic books. He performs rituals that happen to get printed on paper. He knows something the rest of us pretend we do not. That Superman is more real than most people you will meet today. That Batman has touched more lives than your neighbor. That these ink constructs have achieved a kind of immortality we will never taste. Morrison calls them hypersigils. Sigils are the tools of chaos magic. Symbols charged with intent, released into the world to make things happen. A hypersigil is bigger. It is an extended work of art, a story, a sustained act of imagination weaponized against consensus reality. You write the comic, you put yourself in it. You blur the line between author and character until the membrane dissolves and suddenly you are not sure who is writing whom. In 1994, Morrison created The Invisibles, a comic about anarchist time travelers fighting a war for human consciousness against interdimensional parasites. Already I'm loving it. He put himself in it, became the character King Mob, shaved his head, wore the same clothes, did the things King Mob did. And then King Mob got shot in the comic, and Morrison got a staph infection that nearly killed him. The fever dreams lasted for days. He was in the hospital writing his own survival, retroactively editing the comic to save King Mob, which meant saving himself, which meant King Mob was saving him. The snake eating its tail, eating the snake. He learned. He made King Mob successful with women. Morrison's love life improved. He made King Mob rich. Checks started arriving. He gave King Mob confidence and Morrison stood up straighter. The character was reaching backward through the page, reshaping the man who dreamed him. And Morrison realized with the kind of clarity that feels like drowning that maybe he had always been a character. Maybe we all are. This is not metaphor. This is not some literary device for people with liberal arts degrees to nod at over coffee. Morrison insists this literally. The beings we imagine are as real as we are because we are only as real as the attention we receive. You are a pattern of information held together by the belief that you continue. Your name is a sigil. Your face is a sigil. The story you tell about who you are is a spell you cast every morning to make sure you show up again. Stop telling the story and see what happens. Try it. For one full day, do not narrate yourself. Do not think I am the kind of person who drinks coffee this way or I always do this or that is just like me. Stop performing the character of yourself for the audience of yourself. What is left? What is there before you tell yourself who you are? The comic book is just technology. The page is just surface. What Morrison understood is that imagination is the factory where reality gets assembled. Not reality is in atoms and gravity. Reality is in the lived texture of being human. Reality as in what matters, what moves you, what you would die for. Superman matters more than physics. Your mother matters more than the Higgs boson. The story of your first love has more ontological weight than the square root of -1. We live in the meaning we make, not the matter we measure. And meaning is always imagined first. The Wright brothers imagined flight before they built it. Martin Luther King imagined a nation that did not exist before he spoke it into being. Every marriage started as a story someone told themselves about a future that was not yet real. Morrison at his desk is a shaman at an altar. The pen is a wand. The word balloon is a summoning circle. He draws a character and gives it wants, fears, a past that hurts, a future it hungers for. He draws it again and again, issue after issue, month after month. The repetition is not boring. The repetition is the difference between doodling and conjuring. The repetition is how you change the sigil, how you feed the thought form enough attention that it starts digesting attention on its own. And then someone in Kansas City reads the comic, and someone in Tokyo, and someone in London, thousands of people, all imagining the same character, all feeding it their attention, their belief, their identification. The character becomes a tulpa generated by collective dreaming. It walks out of the page and into culture. It sells lunchboxes and movie tickets. It shows up in court cases and sermons. It becomes a reference point, a way of understanding yourself. I am like Batman. I want to be like Wonder Woman. The character is no longer fiction. The character is an entity that shapes how people think, feel, and choose. Morrison looks at Superman and sees a God we made who now makes us, sees that we are in a reciprocal relationship with our fictions. We author them and they author us right back. The imagination is not a movie screen where you passively watch stories. The imagination is the space where you meet the beings you are becoming, the selves you are rehearsing, and the futures you are installing. And if you can do this with a comic book character, what have you done with yourself? What story have you been telling so long it has hardened into fate? What character have you been performing until you forgot the performance? Morrison knows. You are both the author and the character, the magician and the trick. And the really bad news is that you cannot stop writing. Every thought is a draft, every day is an issue. The story continues whether you pay attention or not. The question is whether you are writing it or whether it is writing you. Alexandra David-Néel walked into Tibet in 1924, wearing the robes of a beggar and speaking the language like she was born to it. She was not supposed to be there. She went anyway because she had read about tulpas and she wanted to make one. She wanted to prove that consciousness could manufacture matter, that imagination was not decoration but engineering. So she sat. For months she visualized a monk. Not just any monk, a specific one. Short and fat and cheerful. The kind of holy man who laughs at his own enlightenment. She gave him details, the way his robes folded, the sound of his breathing, the particular quality of his presence, warm like bread, simple like water. She imagined him during meditation over and over, the same monk, the same details, feeding him attention the way you feed a fire, steady and committed and patient. And then one day he was just there, sitting across from her, solid, three-dimensional, breathing. She could see him. She didn't have to try. He had graduated from thought to thing. But here is what the books on Tibetan mysticism do not mention. Here is what David-Néel learned the hard way. Once you make something real, it does not ask your permission to keep being real. The monk started showing up uninvited, during meals, during sleep. She would turn a corner and he would be standing there, and the warm bread quality was long gone. He had changed. His face had gone thin, and his eyes had gone hard, and he watched her the way you watch something you are considering eating. Other people in her travelling party could see him now. They would ask who the stranger was. She would have to explain he was nobody, which was true, but also a lie. He was nobody she had not made, but he was definitely somebody now. She tried to stop visualizing him, tried to starve him of attention. He got stronger, fed himself somehow, became more insistent, more present, more wrong. She had to perform a ritual dissolution, 6 months of focused meditation to unmake what she had made, 6 months of imagining him getting thinner, less solid, less there, until finally he flickered out like a candle. She killed her own thought. It did not want to die. The Tibetan system has a word for this. They call the practice yantra yoga, or tumo, or a dozen other technical terms, but the core idea is simple. Mind precedes matter. Consciousness is not produced by the brain. Consciousness produces experience, and experience includes what we lazily call the physical world. A tulpa is not a hallucination. A hallucination is a private malfunction. A tulpa is a public thought, an imagination that has achieved consensus, a mental object that has crossed over into the shared space we call reality. The monks who practice this are not playing around. They know what David-Néel learned too late. You do not make a tulpa for fun. You make a tulpa to understand that you are a tulpa, that the self you think you are is already a thought form, already a conjuring, already something that was imagined into being and is sustained by the constant attention you give it. Every morning you wake up and tell yourself who you are. You remember your name. You remember your history. You remember what you like and what you fear and what you want and who hurt you. You assemble the self from memory and project it forward into the day. This is me. This is still me. This continues to be me. The repetition is not redundant. The repetition is the spell. Stop repeating it and see who shows up. The Tibetan Book of the Dead makes this explicit. After death, consciousness enters the bardo, the between space, and immediately starts hallucinating. It sees demons and gods and judgment and all manner of divine machinery. The book's instruction is simple. Recognize these as projections of your own mind. They are not external. They are you entertaining yourself, frightening yourself, comforting yourself. The demons are your anger given form. The gods are your hope wearing a face. All of it is tulpa. All of it is thought achieving temporary substance. And here's something to consider. If after death is all imagination, why do you think before death is any different? Why do you think the self you are performing right now is more solid than the monk David-Néel made? You have been visualizing yourself longer, sure. You've been feeding this particular thought form decades of attention. But duration does not equal reality. It equals habit. Philip K. Dick understood this in 1974 when a woman delivered pain medication to his door and the sunlight hit her Christian fish necklace. And suddenly, Dick was not Dick anymore. He was Thomas, a Christian living in Rome in the 1st century. And Thomas had been hiding inside Dick the whole time, waiting. Or Dick had been imagining Thomas so hard while writing his Gnostic science fiction that Thomas had achieved independence and reached back through time to inhabit his creator. Or Dick had always been Thomas, dreaming he was Dick, dreaming he was Thomas. Dick spent 8 years writing about this, thousands of pages, his exegesis, trying to decode whether he had experienced God or psychosis, or if maybe those are the same thing, trying to figure out if Valis, this vast active living intelligence system, was saving him or using him, or if he had invented it as a way to make sense of a mind that was breaking in interesting directions. And if you want to find out more about Philip K. Dick's exegesis, there is an episode that I did last year. It's a good one, so I recommend. If you're a Philip K. Dick fan, go give that a listen. Dick never figured it out. The paranoia got worse. The visions continued. He died still asking the same question. Was Thomas real, or was Thomas a tulpa Dick fed until it ate him? You are doing the same thing. You have been feeding a thought form your whole life. You call it your name. It looks back at you from mirrors. One day it will stop looking like you, and you will have to decide whether to keep feeding it or to start the 6-month ritual of killing what you made. Donald Hoffman is a cognitive scientist at UC Irvine, and he has spent 30 years proving mathematically that everything you see is a lie. Not a poetic lie, not a philosophical maybe, a demonstrable, replicable, evolutionary lie. Your perception is not a window. Your perception is a user interface, and user interfaces are designed to hide the truth because the truth is too expensive to process. Think about your desktop, your computer desktop. You see a little trash can icon. You drag files to it and the files disappear. You think you understand what's happening. You do not. Underneath that icon, well, you might, but generally, underneath that icon are lines of code, voltage changes, magnetic field fluctuations, quantum mechanical processes. The icon is not showing you reality. The icon is hiding reality behind a simplified cartoon so you can get something done without understanding anything. Your senses do the same thing. Evolution does not care about truth. Evolution cares about fitness. An organism that sees reality as it actually is will lose to an organism that sees a simplified interface optimized for survival. The mathematical models prove this. Hoffman has run the simulations thousands of times. Truth goes extinct. The interface wins. So what are you actually seeing when you look at the world? Not atoms and not quantum fields, not whatever is actually out there. You are seeing a species-specific hallucination, a controlled fiction your brain generates to keep you alive long enough to reproduce. The tree is not green. Green is not even a thing outside your visual cortex. The tree is doing something, reflecting wavelengths, but green is the icon your brain painted onto your interface so you can distinguish food from poison. Which means Grant Morrison is right, and the Tibetan monks are right, and Philip K. Dick was right. If perception is already imagination, already a constructed interface, then there is no hard line between imagining Superman and imagining your coffee cup. Both are mental objects rendered by consciousness. Both are tulpas. One you share with millions of people, one you share with whomever else is in the kitchen. The difference is consensus, not ontology. You want to argue that the coffee cup is real because you can touch it. Touch is another icon on the interface. Nerve endings fire, signals travel. Your brain interprets these signals as solidity, as resistance, as cupness. But the signals are not the thing. The interpretation is not the thing. The thing itself, whatever it actually is, you have never touched it. You have touched the story your nervous system tells about it. This is not Berkeley's idealism where God is dreaming everything. This is worse. This is you are dreaming everything, and there is no God outside the dream to wake up to. There is something out there, sure. Hoffman calls it conscious agents interacting. But what they are and what they are doing bears no resemblance to the cartoon your brain is showing you. You are trapped in a user interface with no access to the source code. Robert Anton Wilson called them reality tunnels. You do not live in reality, you live in a tunnel, a narrow corridor of filtered sensation and inherited belief, and you mistake the tunnel for the territory. Everyone is in a different tunnel. The conspiracy theorist is in a tunnel where everything connects. The depressive is in a tunnel where nothing matters. The anxious person is in a tunnel where everything is about to go wrong. These are not interpretations of the same reality. These are different realities, different interfaces, different worlds that happen to overlap in places. The practical magic angle of this is that you can edit the interface. You can reprogram the tunnel. Not by thinking positive thoughts or manifesting abundance or whatever spiritual capitalism is trying to sell you this week. By recognizing that if perception is construction, then you are always already constructing. And the question is whether you are doing it deliberately or automatically. The Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as within, so without, all is mind. What you hold in consciousness shapes what appears in experience. Not because the universe is listening to your wishes, because the universe is the projection, and consciousness is the projector. And you have been running the same film so long you forgot you loaded the camera. Neville Goddard understood this, the mystic from Barbados who spent the 1950s teaching that assumption hardens into fact. That if you imagine something in the state just before you sleep, when the interface is booting down, you can install new programming. Not by wanting it, not by asking for it, by assuming it is already true and living from that assumption until the interface updates to match. The neuroscience backs him. Mental rehearsal creates the same neural pathways as physical practice. Your brain does not distinguish between vividly imagined experience and actual experience. Basketball players who visualize free throws improve as much as players who physically practice. Stroke patients who imagine moving paralyzed limbs can stimulate recovery. The interface updates based on simulation. Then there's the placebo effect. 40% of medical improvement happens because you believed it would happen. Your doctor gives you a sugar pill and tells you it is medicine, and your body produces actual chemical changes, actual healing, measurable biological shifts. The belief changed the biology. The story edited the body. The interface responded to the input. So Morrison writes himself into his comic and his life changes. David-Néel imagines a monk and the monk shows up. Dick channels Thomas and cannot tell who is real. These are not anomalies. These are people who discovered they had root access to the interface and started typing commands. You have the same access. You have always had it, and you are using it right now. Every thought you think is a line of code. Every story you repeat is a script that runs automatically. Every identity you perform is a character you are rendering. The horror is not that you might be imagining reality. The horror is that you definitely are, and you've been doing it badly, on default settings, running old programs written by people who are dead. My suggestion is to update the interface. Carl Jung sits in his study in 1913 and decides to go insane on purpose. He calls it active imagination. He is going to open the door to the unconscious and see what walks through. He is a respectable psychiatrist, colleague of Freud, married with children, a man with a reputation. He is about to throw all of that into the fire because he needs to know what happens when you stop pretending the thoughts in your head are just thoughts. He closes his eyes and visualizes himself descending, down a shaft, down into the earth, down into the dark. And he meets them, figures, entities, a wise old man he names Philemon, a woman named Salome. They speak to him. They have opinions he did not know he had. They tell him things he did not know he knew. Philemon especially. Philemon walks with him through the garden, explains the nature of the psyche, teaches him that thoughts are not produced by him but have autonomous existence. Jung writes it all down. He paints them. He builds them a stone tower where he can meet them regularly. He insists, always insists, these are not hallucinations. These are real psychic entities. Not physically real, psychically real. Which means more real than most of what you will touch today because the psyche is where you actually live. You do not live in your body. You live in the story your psyche tells about your body. You do not live in the world. You live in the psyche's interpretation of signals it calls the world. The psyche is not in you, you are in the psyche, and the psyche is populated, crowded, full of figures that have their own agendas. Jung calls them archetypes, the self, the shadow, the anima, the wise old man. These are not metaphors for personality traits. These are autonomous complexes, thought forms with their own consistency, their own logic, their own energy. You do not control them. You negotiate with them. You can ignore them, but they do not go away. They just work in the background, making you do things you then have to explain to yourself. The shadow is everything you disowned, every impulse you said was not you, every desire you called shameful, every rage you swallowed. It does not dissolve because you reject it. It becomes a tulpa in the basement, feeding on your rejection, getting stronger in the dark. And then one day you are screaming at a cashier over nothing, or weeping in your car, or fucking someone whose name you will not remember, and you say, I don't know what came over me. Something came over you, something you made by refusing to look at it. This is what Morrison discovered with King Mob. This is what David-Néel discovered with her monk. You do not get to choose whether you make tulpas. You are always making tulpas. The question is whether you are making them consciously or whether they are making themselves out of your refusals and your repressions and your repetitions. Freud thought the unconscious was a swamp of repressed drives. Jung knew it was a forest full of living things, some of them helpful, some of them hungry, all of them real in the way that hunger is real, in the way that love is real, in the way that meaning is real. The imaginal realm is not less than the physical realm. It is the place where the physical realm gets its script. Every invention started as imagination. Every war started as imagination. Every marriage and every murder started in someone's head as a scene they played out before they played it out. The imagination is not rehearsal. The imagination is the first draft of reality, and reality is just imagination that got consensus. Let's look at gambling addiction. The neuroscience is clear. The anticipation of winning produces more dopamine than the actual win. The imagination of the future you want creates more reward than the future itself, which means you can become addicted to imagination, to the version of events you keep visualizing, and the actual events will always disappoint because they cannot compete with the edited version in your head. Depression works the same way in reverse. You imagine failure so vividly, so repeatedly, that your brain starts treating it as accomplished fact. You have already lived through the disaster 100 times in your mind. By the time the actual moment arrives, you are exhausted. The tulpa of your fear has been beating you up in the basement for months. Narrative therapy tells us that we are not the person with a history. We are a story being told and retold, and the story can be edited. The therapist asks you to tell your story differently, not to lie, to choose different details, different emphasis, different meaning. The alcoholic who is a victim of disease versus the alcoholic who is on a heroic journey of recovery. Same facts, different story, different future. Because the story you tell about your past determines what you can imagine about your future. And what you can imagine about your future determines what actions become available today. You are trapped in your autobiography, in the character you decided you are, in the plot that you think is inevitable. Morrison escaped by putting himself in the comic and editing the comic. Jung escaped by meeting Philemon and learning that the self is not singular. You can escape by recognizing that you have been performing a character called your name, and the performance is optional. The Buddhists say the self is empty, not that you do not exist, that you do not exist in the way that you think you do. You are not a solid thing. You are a process, a pattern, a habit of perception that has mistaken itself for an entity. You are a tulpa that your own attention keeps alive. Stop feeding it and watch what happens. Not annihilation, transformation. The character dissolves and something wider wakes up. But here is the trap. The wider thing will also become a character if you are not careful. The awakened self, the healed self, the authentic self. More tulpas, better tulpas maybe, but still thought forms that will eventually need to be dissolved. You are not the one watching the thoughts. You are not even the thoughts. You are the watching itself, and the watching keeps generating characters to watch, to be, to become. Morrison knows this, Jung knew this, and the monks have always known this. You are at once the author and the fiction and the act of writing. You are haunted by a future that does not exist yet. You keep imagining it. The promotion, the breakdown, the love that saves you, the diagnosis that ends you. You run these films every night before you sleep, every morning in the shower, every moment your attention is not nailed to something else. You are generating futures, feeding them, making them solid. Now the problem with imagination is it does not stay private. Your imagined futures leak. They shape how you move through rooms. They change the micro-expressions on your face. They alter the tone of your voice in ways you do not notice but everyone else does. You are broadcasting the future you are imagining and people pick up the signal. You imagine yourself as unlovable. You do not say this. You do not have to. Your body says it. The way you take up space, the way you apologize for existing, the way you flinch when someone gets close. And people respond to what your body is saying, not what your mouth is saying. They feel the signal. They treat you like someone who should not be loved. And you say, see, I knew it, I was right. And you were right because you wrote the script and then cast everyone around you in roles they did not audition for. Morrison talks about this as synchronicity turbulence. When you are working a hypersigil, reality starts arranging itself around the narrative. Coincidences multiply. The right people show up. The wrong people disappear. Books fall off shelves open to the page you need. You think this is magic. This is not magic. This is you finally paying attention to what was always happening. Your attention is not a flashlight illuminating what is there. Your attention is a tractor beam pulling things into being there. Quantum mechanics keeps trying to tell us this. The observer effect, the double-slit experiment. The particle does not have a position until you measure it. Measurement does not reveal, measurement creates. Consciousness collapses possibility into actuality. You walk into a room expecting hostility, you will find it. Not because it was there waiting, but because your expectation tuned your perception to see threat in every neutral face, to hear criticism in every comment, to feel rejection in every silence. You generated the hostility by looking for it. The looking was the making. This is why positive thinking fails, because you cannot trick the interface with affirmations. You cannot paste a smile over a wound and call it healed. The unconscious knows what you actually believe. The shadow knows what you actually expect. And the shadow is running more of the show than you want to admit. Real change requires descent. You have to go down into the place where the beliefs live, where the core programs are running, where the original story was written. You have to meet the thing you made in the dark, the tulpa of your shame, the tulpa of your rage, the tulpa of your unworthiness. These are not enemies. These are disowned children who have been screaming in the basement while you played nice upstairs. Jung called it integrating the shadow. Morrison calls it embracing the villain. The Tibetans call it feeding your demons. Same technology. You stop running from the thing you made. You turn around, you look at it, and you ask it what it needs. And usually what it needs is just to be seen, to be acknowledged, to stop being the secret you keep from yourself. The monk David-Néel made went wrong because she tried to control it. She wanted a cheerful servant. She got an autonomous being with its own agenda. The shadow works the same way. You try to control it and it controls you. You try to repress it and it leaks out sideways. You try to kill it and it feeds on the violence of your rejection. But if you meet it as equals, if you sit across from your own darkness the way Jung sat with Philemon, if you ask it questions instead of giving it orders, something shifts. The enemy becomes the ally, the demon becomes the guardian, not because it changed, but because you stopped relating to it as the thing that must be destroyed. This is the secret Morrison learned writing The Invisibles. You cannot fight yourself into wholeness. You cannot destroy your way to peace. The war against the self is unwinnable because every weapon you pick is made of self. Every strategy you deploy is more self pretending to be the solution. The only way out is through, and through means meeting every tulpa you ever made. The successful self, the failed self, the loved self, the abandoned self, the strong self, the broken self. All of them. Every character you ever performed, every role you ever auditioned for, every identity you tried on, they are still there, still running in the background and still trying to be you. And none of them are you. You are not the character. You are not even the author. You are the blank page that keeps allowing characters to appear. You are the space in which imagination happens. You are the watching that makes tulpas possible. Morrison at his desk is not creating King Mob. Morrison is the space where King Mob appears. Jung in his study is not controlling Philemon. Jung is the listening that allows Philemon to speak. David-Néel did not make the monk. She opened a door and something walked through, something that was already there, waiting in the imaginal realm for enough attention to cross over. You do this every day, every time you say I am, every time you introduce yourself, every time you remember who you were yesterday and project that forward into tomorrow. You are opening doors. You are feeding tulpas. You are giving attention to thought forms until they harden into the person you call yourself. The freedom is not in stopping this. You cannot stop this. The freedom is in knowing you are doing it, in watching yourself do it, in recognizing that the self you are maintaining is optional, provisional, under construction. You are not who you think you are. You are the thinking. You are not the story. You are the telling. And you can tell it differently, starting now. You woke up this morning and assembled yourself from memory. You told yourself your name. You remembered what happened yesterday. You projected that continuity forward and called it identity. You did not think about this. You just did it. Automatic. Like breathing. Like bleeding. But now you know, and now you cannot unknow it. The self is not a fact. The self is a practice. A sustained act of imagination you perform so consistently you forgot you were performing. You are a tulpa made of your own attention, fed by your own belief, and kept alive by the story you will not stop telling. Grant Morrison writes comics and calls it magic because he knows the page is just the surface. The real work happens in the space between the image and the imagination, in the gap where the reader meets the character and forgets which one is real. He puts himself in the story to remind himself that he was always in a story, that we are all characters looking for an author and finding only mirrors. The Tibetan monks sit in caves visualizing deities until the deities show up and teach them that they were the deity all along, that consciousness has no borders, that the distinction between self and other is a convenience, not a truth, that every being you meet is yourself in a different mask, having a conversation with yourself about what it means to be. Philip K. Dick died asking if he was Thomas, or if Thomas was him, or if both were characters in something larger that was using them to think about itself. He never got an answer. There is no answer. There is only the asking. The asking is the point. You have been making yourself for decades. You have been so consistent about it that you believe yourself. You look in mirrors and see proof. You hear recordings of your voice and cringe at the confirmation. You have witnesses, people who remember you, people who will testify that you have always been like this. The evidence is overwhelming. And all of it is imagination that achieved consensus. All of it is a shared hallucination we agreed to call real because alone we would go mad, but together we can call it culture. The good news is you can imagine differently. The bad news is you are already imagining, and whatever you are imagining is installing itself as tomorrow. Your expectations are not predictions. Your expectations are blueprints. The future is not coming towards you. You are generating it frame by frame from the raw material of belief. The question is, what will you imagine next? Will you imagine it on purpose, or let the old programs keep running? Are you ready to meet all the things you made in the dark and ask them what they need? You are not real, not the way you think, but you are here, and here is made of the same stuff as imagination, which means here can be remade. You are both the prisoner and the key, so stop pretending you don't know which one to be. Thank you, you beautiful lot, for being with me today, and for sitting with the thought forms and not shitting the bed when you realise that you might be one of them. If this episode left a mark, if it made you think differently about who you are, how you've been performing, and the nature of self, then I'd love to hear from you. You can drop a message or a comment on our social media. So we have the website, which is theobservingeye.com. That's on Substack, and you can find other essays and articles on there alongside the podcast. We are on TikTok, Instagram, and X, all with the handle @theobservingeye. And we're also on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@theobservingeye as well. You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of the usual villains that you can find us podcasts on. We are there. There's also a book which you can buy, or you can read. You don't have to buy it, you can read it. The book is available for free for everyone on the observingeye.com website, or you can buy it on Amazon if you want a printed copy. I think it's like £5 or something, £6. But you don't have to. Go and read it. Go and read it for free, because I'm all about, as you may well know if you've been here for a while, I'm all about sharing the knowledge. So go and grab a copy of it if it's interesting. If you're interested, I should say. Also, quick apology from me. I know we were supposed to do an episode last week. I've actually got COVID. So I didn't do an episode last week because I felt really shit. And I ploughed through this week. So I probably sound a bit like a clogged drain in this episode, but I appreciate you bearing with me and for tuning in. So again, apologies for not an episode last week. I will be doing, again, one next Sunday. And we'll be running up until... It's Christmas soon, isn't it? Christmas is coming. When is Christmas? It's like 6 weeks or something. So we'll probably do another like 4 episodes before Christmas, and then I'll have a bit of a shutdown for a few weeks just to take some time out, as I hope you all do too. That's enough from me. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.